We didn't have cameras, were not allowed inside, so Kelly and Jenny have been our eyes and ears. Let's go out to Jenny Day right now with a juror. Jenny?
Yes, guys, I am joined live by one of the jurors, Beverly Feldman. I really sincerely appreciate your time. Again, we have sat in on this trial together for 8 weeks. It is heavy, it is tense, it is emotional today. Let me just start with how you're feeling.
It is that the weight, the heaviness. The heart was pounding in the courtroom. I was in there for those 8 weeks and went in to do my job and all, but today was totally different because we had reached a unanimous verdict and we knew what it was going in there, and our hearts were just pounding. Mine was just pounding.
Understandably so. When you first got in that room, what was the most damning evidence? What all collectively could you agree on right away?
Well, the first thing we did when we got in the room was to go through all of the witnesses, and there was 70 witnesses. And then it was going around each person for 3 minutes. Everybody got time, 3 minutes to start sharing. And what we found out that we were pretty much, as we got around the table, on the same page. There really wasn't, there was evidence that wanted to be looked at again, and which we did. We took it very seriously. Any questions that anybody had, and today, after lunch was our first vote, and we did it privately, all by paper, and it was unanimous.
What for you stuck out? Because so much of this case has been circumstantial. 12 hours the day after she disappeared. His phone was off, 444 miles unaccounted for in the car. What for you stood out as like, you just can't get past this?
If Larry had been at work on the 8th, and he said he was, but he wasn't. If Larry hadn't disappeared for almost 12 hours, which he was unaccounted for, if his phone would have been on, those are the things. If he hadn't repositioned the vehicle and left it around 6:30 in the morning, and so those were things that just couldn't get around the means, the motive, and the opportunity.
And I understand you did not have to reach a unanimous decision when it comes to how she may have died. Prosecutors suggested maybe the loud bangs were gunshots. They also pointed to a vial of hemlock, a poisonous plant found in the home. What for you, how do you think Maya died?
Hemlock was in the home, and I don't have that poison in my home. So it's a possibility. And then it's a possibility of strangulation. We saw the weights in the garage of 45 pounds each, plus the bar, and the bench was no dust on it. He was physically, in our opinion, able to, with Maya being under 100 pounds. So as far as how exactly did he kill her, and we didn't have to come to a unanimous decision on how he actually did it.
Where do you think Maya is?
I think she is out in the desert. I think it's because it's familiar to him, to Maya, and I would think in a way to honor her, to put her in a place that she really enjoyed, in a place knowing the kids would go back with family members. That's where I would think, and that was the 444 miles. And if you go over to the Colorado River, as Investigator Rhodes had investigated, it seems like that would be a pretty probable place.
What did you make of his demeanor? Because he stood, again, so much of the video that we've shown you is Larry in a COVID-style mask because cameras have not been allowed in the courtroom for the actual trial, just the preliminary hearing. So, but you well know, I mean, he stood at attention and smiled at you every single time you entered and exited the courtroom. What did you make of his demeanor?
I think he's a master manipulator. I think he's very good at what he does, and I think that he may have thought that he could get away with this too. And you can see through the testimony and the witnesses. And he was always nice and kind. Well, true, but no, the conclusion, master manipulator.
Was there contention in your deliberations? Like, were there any sticking points that someone said, I just can't get past this part?
Well, there was, until it was pointed out he was a corpsman. It was about the poison. And what the sticking point was, what's the amount? And we had the witness saying, it's so small we can't test it on anybody because it can kill them. And so it was, what is that amount? And then when it was pointed out, but he's got a background. And then it was, that was the change right there. Okay, he should have or could have known that that insignificant amount could cause death.
What about the spell cast? That's a unique angle in this case where defense pointed to him just wanting to save his marriage in a very unusual way.
If he wouldn't have done the spell cast, we probably wouldn't be here today. We wouldn't have this decision. What he did, when the Wiccans come into court and tell you that we wanted away from him, when you have a group that had blocked him, and then you have another one that has come in, Frank Peavy, that says, look, I was just trying to be nice so he couldn't give me a bad review, and until he wanted to get, that says something when they even want to get away. But no, he, out of his mind, he put it all on paper, and it was devastating.
And I mean, just to give you some backstory, there were about 20 spellcast requests like several months before she disappeared, and then the day before up to 400 requests for spells.
Yeah, and you could see that like with his sister-in-law, Genesis, he just repetitive, just not normal behavior. And when he did it then with the spellcast, you could see through the pattern that he went to the family, went to Genesis, and then when he went on the spellcasters, and then what the big deal was, on January 7th, January 8th, it stopped. It was like, he's like, no more about May. Hey, all my extra ones, put it on Jamie Laird.
Let's talk about that. Everyone knows that Maya was having an affair. She wanted a divorce. She had contacted an attorney the very day that she disappeared. Defense kind of suggested that Jamie Laird, her affair partner, had not been thoroughly investigated. What did you make of his testimony? Even his now ex-wife testified. A lot of emotion.
First of all, I was very impressed with Mrs. Laird, the divorced wife. What a professional. She gets that call on January 5th, right before she's going into delivery, and Larry starts in, and then what she hears, it was a lifeline, but May didn't reach the hand to her because she said, he's crazy. And she said, I switched over to the law enforcement, and I asked her, do you need help? She recognized, because she had been getting all of those calls from until she had to block him and block him and block him. And she reached out to him, and she was great with child. And so we had a lot of compassion for her. I'm sorry that it didn't, I'm sorry how the marriage worked out for them. And I'm sorry that May felt that she needed to reach out for somebody for protection, and I think that that's what Jamie became for her, to help break away from this relationship with Larry. That's just what I think about that.
No, absolutely. Again, you guys just deliberated for about 6 hours, maybe even less, and Larry Millete guilty of first-degree murder. So let's go back to that. How did you? Was there ever talk about second-degree murder? Was there ever talk about involuntary or voluntary manslaughter, or are you just right from the gate?
The one in the second-degree point was about the poison and the milligrams, what would it take? And then the juror wasn't quite sure, but wanted to make a proper decision. But when he found out, going through the discussions of what all first-degree murder and what we were looking at, he then said, I see it as first degree.
Defense also pointed to the fact that Maya could have technically left on her own, that surveillance cameras in the neighborhood might not have captured that. I mean, she would have had to jump over her backyard fence and walk down a drainage ditch. Just unfathomable.
The defense started with that from day one on their opening, and theirs was she probably left over the back fence, and number two, the affair. And that was their theme. And so, no, when we looked at that back fence and we saw the drainage, and then when the defense brought in their investigator and the prosecution said, did you do this at nighttime? Did you do this with it? And he hadn't. And so to us on the jury, it's like, it's unreasonable. She was a tiny little thing. It wasn't conducive to go over that black wrought iron fence. So no. And then they asked that investigator, did you watch all of the footage that the prosecution and they had put forward? And he said no. And we're sitting there thinking, how can you be here and you haven't even looked at everything that did you look at the testimony that we've been listening to? And then when he didn't know it was cobwebs on the camera from Mrs. Toole on the corner, and they said, what are we looking at? And all of us in the jury wanted to say, cobwebs.
Yeah. I remember this day. Of course I do, yes.
And because when she originally testified to it and they said, what are we looking at? And she said, cobwebs. I laughed out loud in court because I have cobwebs like that on my camera. But he didn't even know there were cobwebs.
Well, I understand the prosecutors are getting ready to speak now, so I sincerely appreciate your time. I do want to keep the focus on Maya again. Prosecutor saying she would have never left her family. Any final thoughts?
She would have never left her children. She would have never left her family. Never.
I sincerely appreciate your time. I'll toss it to my colleague now, to the prosecutors.